Here we are. Here we are, everybody. So you might be saying, I have never seen Jesse in this location before. And this is because, my friends, I have never been in this location before. I am living out of boxes. I am coming out of a major move. My family just relocated to Chicago, or the Chicago area. Technically, we're in the burbs. So it's not the downtown areas. But I am coming to you from a new location, and I haven't actually figured out where I'm going to put everything yet. But you might recognize. Let's see. I guess it's over here. Well, some of these things you might recognize from my old place, and so this is going to be my new studio now. So today is a fun day. A few things I want to talk about today. First of all, thank you for being here. If you check, and let me make sure. Can you hear me? If you're there, let me see here. Let me just double check that the audio is coming through because we want to make sure. Check. I think it's coming through. So if you can hear me, let me know. And hey, click like, subscribe if you haven't done so. Let's have some fun today. So first of all, I want to thank everybody in the Patreon club. You sent me some really cool questions. And this time, I've got to say the questions, they get interesting. They get pretty interesting. But also, one thing I do want to mention is today is the 4-year anniversary of this bad boy, A Practical Guide to Breathwork. This was my first published book. This was not the first offering that I ever did. The first thing I did was A Practical Guide to Cold Training as an ebook. And you might be familiar with this. Look at that. Where am I pulling all these things out of? Anyway. But yeah, Practical Guide to Cold Training is out now, and it's in every format. So you can get it in Audible, you can get it in print, and you can get ebook, you can get it all over the place. So check those things out. But it is a very special day. September the 19th will always be a very special day for me. It is the day that I published my first book, A Practical Guide to Breathwork. So Practical Guide to Cold Training just came out this past the last day of last month. So August 31st, it came out. And actually, I'll let you know because hey, we're on this live together. This book is 4 years old today. Now, a lot of things have changed in the world of breathwork, and we're going to be talking about this today. A lot of things have changed in the world of breathwork in the past 4 years. You have to remember 4 years ago today, we were in the throes of, I don't know, do people get demonetized if they say COVID now? I mean, it's been so long. I remember for a while, you just weren't supposed to say it in a video. Like if you did, like the algorithm would go all the sorts of different directions. But we were in the pandemic and everyone was afraid to breathe. And so coming out with a book about breath work was kind of an interesting thing. I had planned that though. I didn't plan the pandemic, but I had planned to release the book in September of 2020. I spent most of the year writing that book. And I really wanted to go all over the place to interview a lot of different people in person, but you couldn't go anywhere back then. You guys remember that? You guys remember those times? You couldn't go anywhere. And so I had to do a lot of my research via Zoom. I got really good at Zooming. And I reached out to a lot of different people. And actually, that was when I started to find out about some of the toxic side of the world of breathwork. And we're going to be talking about this today because Angela, thank you, Angela, from the Patreon club. She asked me about, it was kind of a funny question, but she just said, I love the breathwork in the Patreon club. And she said, she was really appreciated that she gets the best of breathwork in the Patreon club, but she was just wondering, what is the worst of breath work? What are the worst kinds of breath work out there? So we're going to talk about that in just a little bit, and we're going to have some fun with that. If you have any ideas on what the worst kinds of breath work are, you can pop them in the chat there. But I do want to talk about this just a little bit with regards to a practice. Oh, hey, it's right behind me. Let's see. Look at that. So I don't know. I'm just setting up this room. This is going to be my new like studio. This is, let's see over here. Right here. There used to be a TV there. I'm not going to put I don't think I'm going to put a TV there. So I might have to take that down and I don't know, put something over it. I've got posters that I've never used before. So maybe should I do posters? Should I do, I don't know. I've got some music posters. Have you ever heard of The Room? Tommy Wiseau. I've got a signed poster of that. I've never used that before. I don't know. Maybe I don't, is that too college? Is that too college dorm room to do that? I don't know. Anyway, this is the new studio. This is the first time I'm here and it's not done. So please bear with me. Anyway, so 4 years ago, I published a practical guide to breath work. A lot has changed in the last 4 years in the world of breath work. And in some of the people that I respect the most in the world of breath work actually are starting to feel like maybe we shouldn't even use the word breath work because it's been bastardized so much by so many people and so many just really maybe well-meaning. I've always been of the opinion that even the worst of breath work is well-meaning people who just don't know any better. And you have to understand that the Dunning-Kruger effect is strong, especially in growing fields of interests. And if you're not familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, just to kind of give you the cliff notes, Dunning and Kruger were these two researchers, and the Dunning-Kruger effect it basically describes how people who are, novices. So a person who knows nothing about a topic, yeah, they're like, hey, I don't know anything about the topic. But it is a human thing that if you know a little bit about the topic, that a person tends to start to think they know a lot more than what they really do. And it's because of this of the other thing that we have as humans, where what we don't know, we don't know, we don't know. And so we start to feel like, well, I must know everything there is to know. So people start to feel like they're experts before they're experts. They, when I was younger, people used to say that they know enough to be dangerous. And actually, that's what I've seen a lot in the world of breath work. So buckle up, guys. We've got a lot of fun stuff to talk about. Please, hit the, what is it? Smash the like button. Let people know that this is the place to hang out, because we're going to be talking about the worst breathworks today. But having said that, bringing it back to the book, and then I'm going to get into the worst breathworks of today. One of the things I'm planning on doing, and you let me know, you can reach out to me at jessecoomer.com. If you've read this book, you know that it's very 2020. And I shouldn't say it's very 2020. Everything in here is still awesome, and it still sells like crazy, and it's still something I require all my breath workers that go through the Language of Breath breathworker program. I require them to read it. In fact, one of the biggest lessons we learn is how to do these protocols in the back of the book, how to put breath work together in order to create like ideal sessions for clients, ideal sessions for yourself, for other people, how to do this safely. But one of the things I'm thinking about doing is updating the book. So next year will be the 5-year anniversary. So next, like literally 1 year from today, will be the 5-year anniversary of this book being published. And what I'm thinking about doing is updating it to a second edition. And in this second edition, I'd like to really show a highlight on some of the best in the world of breath work. Because sadly enough, anytime there's something that gets really popular, there's a lot of people that get into it that really shouldn't, or they jump into it thinking they know a lot more than they do. Again, Dunning-Kruger effect. And then what you have happen is you get a lot of garbage, and a lot of garbage comes off very good looking because they're great at marketing, or hey, maybe they're just really good looking people. And or they've got some enthusiasm, so that maybe it's a great personality or something like that. And before you know it, you have a lot of people having injury, suffering greater amounts of anxiety, having trauma because of breath work, having seizures. These are things that whenever I was early in my practice, and even early on this channel, I had a hard time believing that people could get it so wrong. And then I started to see it myself, and I see it now on Instagram all the time. I see it on YouTube all the time. We're going to talk about it. But what I want to do in the second edition of a practical guide to breath work is basically create a guide to who the best names in breath work are. So one of the people I'm going to be talking to probably will be the guy who wrote the foreword, who is Casper van der Meulen. But there's a lot of other really good names. that I respect a lot. And they offer certifications, they have courses, they do coaching. And I want to highlight those people too. Yes, I have a certification and I think it's the best, right? Because of course I should. If I don't think it's the best, well, I'm not doing my best. But these are also amazing schools that are out there that teach really well, and they're mindful of the possible dangers of breath work and also all the possible things that we need to continue to learn. So some of those people, hey, if you already know who you are because I'm friends with you. I make a point if I really think a person is good, a good voice in this industry, I make a point to reach out, and I make a point to connect with those people. So you already know who you are. Some of you I've already asked. Very few of you I've already asked. But Mike, it's going to happen. Martin, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you. Who else? Chuck, of course, Chuck. I mean, I can't overlook. There's a lot of names that I'm going to be I'm going to be doing a lot of phone calls. So a lot of good stuff coming up. All right. So having said that, let's get into the Q&A. This is the Patreon Breath Club. And so I started on Patreon. This is another thing. I started in 2020 on Patreon. I don't know if I would have stuck with Patreon. The thing is, once you start Patreon, it's kind of hard to not. Like, I think I probably would have my own app, or maybe I would have my own community like housed on my website. But I started on Patreon. It's a great platform. And so I've stuck with it. So if you're part of the Patreon crew, thank you so much for sticking with it. And hey, if you're part of the Patreon crew and you're like, you know what, Jesse, I would love it if we did something else. Let me know. Always feel free to reach out. JesseCoomer.com. Always reach out. Okay. Having said that, let's get into it. So Angela from the Breath Club, she reached out and she wanted to know what are the worst kinds of breath work? What are the kinds of breath work? Because there are ways that you can really hurt yourself psychologically, physiologically. There's terrible things you can do to yourself, but they are breath work. It's like, hey, come to my breathwork session, and we're going to do breath work, and it's going to be great, but they're actually really bad. And so I'm going to try. I'm going to try to avoid calling out specific names because I don't want to bring them any more eyeballs. I also don't want to, maybe I just don't feel like starting beef today, but we got to talk about what to look for if it is awful breath work. So first and foremost, let's jump into it. And if there's ideas that you're thinking of, if there's a name that you're thinking of, you can put it in the chat. If you have any other comments on this, you can put it in the chat. And I don't know if I'll answer it necessarily, but maybe I'll give you a wink, or we'll see. All right. Okay. So let's get started. And by the way, at the next hour, if you're in the Breath Club, we're going to get together for some breath work. I've got a great new soundtrack that I cannot wait to share with you. So if you're not in the Breath Club, now's the perfect time to join, because at the very next hour, we're going to have our monthly breath party on Zoom, and we're going to be practicing some really blissful, deep. I mean, it's the music. I was doing breath work this morning to this music, my morning breath work session, and chef's kiss. All right. Hit the like button if you don't mind. Get the algorithm tickled. Let's talk. Worst kinds of breath work. Here are things to look for if you're looking for the worst kinds of breath work. One, breath work that is focused solely on breathing hard and fast. And that's not always a bad thing, but if this breath worker is saying, okay, all we're going to do, so we're going to sit in a room, we're going to breathe hard and fast, and that's what's going to do this amazing thing for you. And then like the big one is coming up. What is this amazing thing? But let's start with the style of breathing that you can expect. The style of breathing that you can expect for the worst kind of breath work is going to be hard and heavy because of a few things. One, most of, like I was saying earlier, I do think these people are mostly good, well-meaning people who go and they have an experience, they feel amazing, and then before you know it, there is, okay, I had this amazing experience. I'm going to give this experience to other people, right? And hey, that's how I got started. That's how, but it's like, okay, so I want to share this thing that I found. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is that what will happen is a person starts to think, well, what I need to do is I need to recreate this feeling for this other person. And the only way I seem to be able to do it is by breathing heavy and hard. Now, when you breathe heavy and hard, you're doing two big things. One is you're changing your body's pH. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can lead to bad things. One of the things that it can lead to is seizure. So if you are breathing hard and heavy, especially if you're prone to seizures, what it can do is it can reduce the amount of ionic calcium in your blood for a very brief amount of time, which can induce a seizure. And I know a lot of people, oh, it never happened to me. Well, you know what? It won't until it does. And it's happened to me. It's happened to other people. I've seen it happen a lot over my many, many years. I've been a professional breathworker since 2016. All right. So I've worked with a lot of people, and I have learned under people that never really told me about this. And then I had to find out the hard way. So it can lead to those things. And so this is one of those things. If all the person is going to have you do is breathe hard and heavy, then and it's just kind of like banging music and things like that. The thing is, they know that they're going to induce a feeling, but this can be incredibly uncontrolled, and it can lead to a lot of side effects in other people. So we have the pH change. The other thing that happens when we breathe hard and heavy is that we have an autonomic nervous system shift. And oftentimes this will be an uncontrolled sympathetic shift. All right. And so when this happens, you do feel some nice feelings because you're causing yourself to produce stress hormones. This is probably what made that person, who is probably a rookie, who just is well-meaning, just trying to help share the love. And man, I felt so good. So here, let me help you feel so good. This is probably what that person is shooting for. Hey, I want you to feel high on your own supply. Everybody repeats that nowadays, right? I want you to feel so good. Now, there's nothing wrong. Again, there's nothing wrong with these things inherently. But when the person relies on just heavy and hard breathing, and that's kind of the only thing they do, you can rest assured this person is probably just a rookie who is presenting as someone who, oh, I'm very confident. What's interesting about being a human being is that we have taste, the sense of taste, we have the sense of smell. These are senses that we developed to know not to eat rotten things or not to eat things that were possibly poisonous. Like, for instance, if you're out in nature and you taste something and your tongue goes numb, okay, I need to not eat the rest of that. Or if it smells bad, right? We have our other senses to know, okay, if it is a loud sound, maybe a low pitch, or maybe there's a tiger nearby or something like that. We have a lot of senses that help us to stay safe, but we don't have any senses that let us know when the other person is full of it. And the problem is, if a person presents as incredibly competent and incredibly, hey, I know what I'm talking about. The problem is that you're going to be more likely to believe them. So a person who is incredibly confident in what they say might come out and be completely, have no idea what they're talking about. And so and here's the problem. That's difficult to know. Does this person have any real knowledge? So one of the ways you can know this is if they just go straight into hyperventilation, and that's like their one trick pony, if that's all they're doing. And it seems like, wow, this is just uncontrolled. Maybe there's a lot of screaming. Yeah. This is probably a person who's just trying to create an experience and doesn't really understand what the experience they're trying to create is. Another thing to look for is, especially in sessions like this, the person might start to attribute, and that you see this a lot. And actually, I'm going to, if you're on Instagram or if you're on YouTube or social media at all, and you're into breath work, you probably are being inundated by ads And I just want you to think about the ads that you are inundated by. And I want you to think about the ones that seem to show things like a person really, like the breath worker is this person who is hovering over the person who is breathing, and it's like they're doing something, right? It's like, oh wow, it's almost like they're the magic creator. They're rubbing on parts and they're doing all these things, and oh, I got to do all this stuff to make sure you have an experience. If and what they're doing in those images and videos is they're saying basically, it's me that is doing this thing for you. And the problem that I see in breath work, and you see it in other fields as well, is that a person will get into it because they want to feel important. And probably also because, hey, I really want to help people, I want to do good things, but I really want to feel important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the session all about me. So there's a lot of things that makes all the people make noises, and they want the breathers to have these breakthroughs and all these things because it makes them feel amazing about themselves. So if you see a breath worker, if you're at a breathwork session and the facilitator is really focusing on let's all make sounds, let's all like scream, let's all cry, let's all do all these things, it's likely that that person, that facilitator is making it more about, hey, I want to feel like I'm doing a good job and I'm providing a good show, rather than really being interested in guiding you through a meaningful experience. So these are really common things that I see, and sadly enough, they make really good social media posts, right? You see people, you're like, wow, look at the whatever. and then here's the next big one to watch for. When the breath worker will tell you, okay, you know that feeling you're feeling, that is this thing I want you to believe in. Okay. And you'll see this all the time. When I was writing my second book, actually, can I do this? Let's see. This one here, The Language of Breath. All right. When I was writing my second book, my editor, so I was going through a traditional publisher at the time, and my creative, I forget exactly I had so many different editors, but my very first editor, my developmental editor, that's what she did. She said, I did breath work too. And I said, really? That's great. What kind of breath work did you do? Well, I was in a cult when I was younger, and we did breath work in this cult. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. But this is true. You will see in cults or in movements where a person, and again, a lot of times, here's the biggest problem, okay? Good intentions, well-intended people, right, might say certain things. They may believe it 100%. But do you know what is the road that's paved with good intentions? It's the road to hell, right? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so you have to be, it's a super big buyer beware. And hey, Coakley Clue, I'll take a look at your comments here in just a minute. And I apologize for glazing over your comments. Let me come back to your comments in just a second. I'm on a run here. I'm on a thought here. So, but thank you for making comments. And please, guys, if you have comments, questions, or anything like that, you can always put them in the chat. Let's have a good time today. So the thing is, why is it used? Why are these things used? And it's not just breath work that's used in cults. There's a lot of other things that are used. But most of the time, what they do is they will put you into some kind of a situation that will change your state. And it may be in a positive way, it may be in a negative way. With breath work, right? There's things you can induce things, right? And a person who's an experienced breath worker, sadly enough, eventually you realize, wow, I can really mess with a person if I wanted to, right? And that is the responsibility you have as a breath worker. If you're considering doing this and be a facilitator, you do want to get some really good training, because the problem is that there's so many quote unquote facilitators out there that they don't realize that they're just putting some tricks together sometimes that will induce a certain reaction. Because when you're doing the vast majority of this breath work, which is cyclical breathing. So some hyperventilative style breath work. There's a lot of things happening, and these are psychological things happening. And if you've read Language of Breath, thank you so much for that comment, by the way. If you read that, I explain a lot of the conscious and unconscious processes that you're working with in breath work that a lot of people glaze over, but you're really working with those things. And it's not just what a lot of times a person will focus on is just, well, we're reducing CO2 levels, or if you're really getting out there, oh, we're channeling the energies and things like that. Here's the danger that you can run into if you run into someone who is sometimes very well-meaning, or other people who are just total, I don't know, assholes. We could just call them what they are. They will say, oh, you know that thing you felt? Let me tell you what it was. And they will lead you to believe in something that they want you to believe because it felt so profound. Let me tell you what that was. That was the power of whatever spiritual thing I want you to believe. That was the power of this or that. It was simply the power of breathing at this cadence. It will channel your energies and it will cause the universe to do your will. And the problem is you just had this profound experience, and this person was there, and it does sort of open you up to these ideas. In fact, this is one of the things that I found out about transference, which is ultimately the facilitator can really put thoughts and content into your mind as you go through these sessions. And if you don't really have a great and good and trustworthy facilitator, you can get thoughts and things in your head that are difficult to get out. Now, I can go in depth, and in the trainings that I do, I go in kind of depth. I try not to go too far in depth because people is like, dude, I don't care. But as to why this is, but just a simple thing that we're talking about here is ultimately you're more suggestible, right? You're just more suggestible. Your executive function is not as strong. So your ability to really your kind of ultimately your defenses are down. And so you're more suggestible. Your limbic system is more active. Your emotional states are higher. You're more likely to put these things, whatever is said or the tone. There are things that even voice tones and things like that start to like, why am I always going into this whatever voice whenever I'm, doing this? And so it's important to understand that there are a lot of well-meaning people that are probably very good people that have kind of fallen into these tropes that you'll see on Instagram, YouTube. You'll see them out there. And what'll happen is they don't realize it and they think they're doing something good. And hey, you know what? This is another thing. We don't have a sense to know when we're wrong. This is important. I don't know if you know who Stephen Covey was. So if you've ever read Stephen Covey's book, Stephen Covey wrote the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the chapters that he wrote was about how we don't have the ability to know when we're wrong. And he tells a story about whenever he was on a subway once. And this guy came in with these kids, and the kids were rambunctious. They were running all over the place. And the guy just was sitting there kind of slumped in his chair, kind of like closing his eyes. And he was just kind of just zoning out. And the guy's like, Stephen was like, hey, man, I've been really, would you mind doing something about your kids? And Stephen Covey, he was like, I was really thinking the worst about this guy. This guy is a bad father. This guy doesn't care about, decorum of what it's like to be on. It was on a subway. He should know better. He's being, just being a bad person. He was making all these judgments because he didn't know, right? He didn't actually know the real situation, but he was making judgments based off of what he felt like he saw. And the father turned around. He says, and I'm so sorry. Their mother just died. We just got back from the hospital and they don't know how to take it. And you know what? Neither do I. And so I'll try to get them quiet, right? We don't have an ability to know when we're wrong. So these people that are going out there, you know, kind of half cocked, they're doing their best. And I'm not necessarily pointing blame, but you know, they can do a lot of harm. So these are things to look for. Does the person just rely solely on hard and heavy breathing? I sometimes call them the huff and puffs, as if they're out of Harry Potter movies or something. But if that's all they're doing, they're just huff and puff, and they claim that the breath does this and this and this, and they're making these claims as far as like this, you're feeling this thing. Oh, what you're feeling is all of the illness leaving your body when you do this breathing session with me. And you're like, well, I certainly feel good. Maybe they're right. I want that to be true. Maybe that's right. Okay. And this is again how people use it in cults and in movements. And you know, they'll make all kinds of claims that are not really substantial. You can't substantiate these claims. But it's like, well, I feel this way. I want it to be true. So maybe it is true. So how do you know if someone is, hey, you know what? I just got a question. How do you know if someone is legit? You do have to vet them. Okay. So this is one of those things where you should look for the red flags, right? So you do want to look for the red flags. So one of the faculty at the Language of Breath School, he was telling me about this session that he went to. And, you know, I love going to other breathwork sessions. I love it when someone else is guiding me. I guide people all the time. Now, this is what I do for a living. So whenever I go and someone is willing to guide me through breathwork, I'm just like, yes, let it happen. And so Ryan Bean, who is associate faculty at Language of Breath School, he went to this breathwork session, and the guy he started going into kind of what I was just talking about, and he started making these, you know, go hard or go home type of statements, right? And he said, you know, if you give up on this session, you give up on yourself, right? And he's trying to do it, and you know, he's probably trying to do it in this whole self-empowerment and things like that. But what you want to do is go to a person who is, first of all, you want to kind of vet the person, you know, check them out beforehand. You can read my books, you know what I'm about. If you wanted to take a session from me, you can be in the breathwork, in the breath club. Like if you're in the breath club, you get to know me pretty well. And then what you want to try to do is this person focusing on making you have an experience? Is this person just trying to blow your mind, right? Is this person, because that's one of those telltale signs that it's about them, it's not about you. Is this person, okay, so now here are the positive things you're trying to look for. Does this person create a place of safety for my practice? So just blaring loud music and stuff like that. Yes, music can be great and all those things, but is this person trying to make more of a show of it? Or is this person focused on creating a safe environment that is going to help me to feel comfortable, calm, and relaxed, right? Does this person get straight into the breath work, or is this person explaining what is about to happen? I've worked with the biggest names in breath work, and very few I'll say it the other way. Most of these big names that you've heard of don't do that. It's like they're trying to put on some kind of show. I want this theatrical value. I want to blow your mind. And you should know. So what this is, it's informed consent. Okay. And this is very important. You should know what you're getting into before you get into it. And I know this sounds obvious, but you go to a lot of these places, people are wanting to give you this amazing experience, and they feel like this is boring. They feel like this is going to take away from your experience, take away from your enjoyment. That is not a good thing, right? That means, again, they're just trying to impress. They're trying to show how amazing I am. No, if the breath facilitator is responsible for your safety and well-being. So that person should give you an explanation. This is what we're going to do today. If you have these contraindications, you should not do this session, right? Now, that should have been ahead of time before you got there, but it's a thing that they should remind you about By the way, if you're pregnant, nursing, if you have epilepsy, if you have uncontrolled high blood pressure, depending on what kind of session you're going to get into, right? The other thing is, does the person just go straight into superventilation, or I call it superventilation, hyperventilation, or whatever? Or does the person have an element of embodiment? Is this just like, hey, if we breathe like this, somehow it magically changes everything? Or is the person looking at the whole human that's in front of them? As the session goes on, are you being, is the person trying to, and the problem is you've got to keep your guard up a little bit if you don't already know this person, right? But if you feel like this person is trying to persuade you to believe something that you don't naturally believe, or you don't really want to, get into your head, well, that's something that, I should have been told about this beforehand, right? So if you're into manifesting and things like that, and you want to go to a session where they talk about manifesting, great. But I'm not into that myself. And so if I go to a session and it's all about manifesting, like, oh, come on, I didn't want this. And here this person is, trying, it's not what I really want. So you should know a lot of things about the session before it starts. The other thing is this person cramming people into a room, right? Look at the environment. Is this person just trying to cram as many people into a room to make as much money as possible without any help? Is this person, and how does that person, maybe a person is going to prep you for the session, but that person, is that person cueing you to do certain things that might not feel natural? So for instance, is that person cueing you to scream and cry and run around and put on a show? That is one way to make sure that everyone has an experience, but that's not necessarily something that they should be doing. And I'll say it again. I say it to my students at the Language of Breath School. The best breath work is often incredibly boring to watch. And that's good. That's fine. Because they're not there to put on a show for me. They're having an experience on their own. You're having an experience on your own. You're lying there. And if you're doing it right, you're having an amazing experience, but it's all inside. It's not like, oh, I need to shout and scream at other people. I need to outwardly tell everybody. There's some people that go just for that, by the way. And those are people, just don't come to my sessions, please. Because if you're coming to make it all about you and how much you like to scream and stuff, I don't have time for that. Anyway, okay. Another thing that you want to make sure that a facilitator is going to offer you is a lot of integration time. So you shouldn't be going straight from session to, okay, see you next week. You take your last breath or, whatever it is. And then it's like, well, it's time to go, everybody. Those sessions you should always have some time for integration, and there should be time allotted for that, for talk, for, any kind of, there should be a very safe space for people after the session. So you shouldn't just be kicked out the door. Those are some basics. There's other things as well. I have to get on to the next topic here. Okay, so this is Damien here. I see. Yeah, the sandy beaches. Yes. Hey, how you doing, buddy? Okay, I got to get on to the next topic. I could go on and on about this. I'm very passionate about it. And a lot of other breathwork schools that I respect a lot, we talk in the back channels. And these are conversations that are happening that are not necessarily in plain sight, but there's a lot of concern in the world of ethical breathwork about these topics. So if you are interested in becoming a breath worker, if you're wanting to do it ethically, there's a lot of schools out there that make a lot of claims and things. And they'll even guarantee you're going to be a millionaire tomorrow or whatever. Reach out to me for a more realistic outlook and for a safe way to do it. If you're a coach, if you're a therapist, things like that, these are the tools you need. But if you're learning from the yahoos, you're going to hurt your clients more than you're going to help them. So that's all I'm going to say, because I got to fortunately, the next two are pretty short. But okay, Ask me the question about CO2 tolerance and CO2. So Ask me asked me about uh, he was noticing, a lot of people, and even I think in my first book, right, the one I was just talking about, a practical guide, the practical guide, I, this is back whenever we were under the impression that that CO2 is the primary thing that makes us need to breathe, right? Which is, it's not wrong. Like CO2 does cause a buildup of CO2 is going to cause you to have that strong urge to breathe. It's also what causes you to have that suffocation feeling. But there are a lot of other things that make you have the urge to breathe. And so Hashmi was asking me, hey, he was noticing, and very rightly so, that he wasn't waiting for the urge to breathe to breathe. Have you ever noticed that? Okay, so if CO2 is the primary driver of the urge to breathe, why is it that you're not constantly waiting until you just feel that like you have to breathe? And this is stuff I talk about a little bit more in the language of breath, and I discuss a lot in our teacher training. There are a lot of unconscious processes that form your habits, that form your actions. And ultimately, your urge to breathe is sort of a complex thing. So, and it's not even the urge to breathe. It's why do you breathe the way you breathe when you breathe that way? So right now, because I'm talking about the urge to breathe, you might be thinking about that. And that means you're consciously controlling your breathing. But most of the time, our breathing is an unconscious process, and that is determined how we are breathing in that moment is determined by our expectations of what the event is. So you have this unconscious part of you. And again, that's this book here. Look at that. I kind of like the new setup. Okay, so I can point to which book I'm talking about. This book here, Language of Breath, or the online course if you want to take a deep dive. So I've got the premium online course at jessecoomer.com and at languageofbreathcollective.com. If you want to take the super, super deep dive, take that course. But you've got these unconscious processes that determine so many things in how you feel and your actions, your beliefs, your limiting beliefs. Those are real. Okay. The limiting beliefs are real. They are not things that a breathwork session will like burn away or cleanse you. That's another red flag. I could go all day on the red flags, but the unconscious you has beliefs as far as the situation you're in. And that is generally what I would consider your primary, the primary reason for your breathing cadence is the predictions and simulations that your unconscious is doing in the moment that will determine what you're breathing at, why you breathe that way, how deep, how shallow, how fast. Now we can work with that a lot, and that's what Language of Breath is all about. That's what good breath workers do. And again, some of those names I mentioned earlier, those are people you're going to hear from in the next edition of A Practical Guide to Breathwork, because they're onto this as well. But yeah, it's not just CO2 that causes that. So Hashmi, thank you so much for that question. I appreciate you a ton. Thank you for being everyone. All these questions are coming from a higher level tier. I think it's the silver or gold tier in the Patreon club. And you can DM me if you're in these tiers. And I've already answered these questions in DMs. I always want to make sure, just in case I go on and on, like I kind of did today, that you get the answer. So people DM me, from these higher level tiers. I'm always happy. Josh asked the question, because he recently heard me talk about why nasal is like, okay, so I'll give you the background because it was a whole conversation. So thank you, Josh, for this question. The last question for the day. And then we're about to go do the breath party with the breath club. So stick around. If you're in the breath club, we're going to do the party. If you're not in the breath club, it's only $5 to join. I don't know how long I can afford to keep it that cheap, but it's only $5 to join. You can get into our next breath session. You can experience some pretty awesome breath work. We will be doing super ventilation, so some cyclical over breathing. But guess what? I'm going to explain to you everything that we do beforehand, and it'll be very safe. We'll have integration time at the end. And the tunes are going to be off the hook. I found an album that I just can't get enough of right now. Okay, having said that, so Josh noticed a post that I made. I was commenting about athletes who are taping their mouths shut, and they're trying to do everything nasal. And this is a big trend right now. Just do everything nasal. And I will say this, there is some truth in it that most people breathe through the mouth way too soon. They shouldn't be breathing through the mouth as quickly or as often. But I made the comment, and I've made a few posts about this, that there is a good time and place to use mouth breathing. Mouth breathing is not the enemy. It's just not the only thing that you should have in mind. It's not the first step. Now, this is for athletes. If you're doing breath work and you're sitting down, I'm a big fan of nasal, 100% nasal for breath work. But I'm talking about athletic training. When I train athletes, I use a variation. So if you've heard of Brian McKenzie, he has a 5-gear system. I use a variation of that, something that I adapted from his system. He is an amazing thought leader in the world of athletic breath training. And I just adapted it from what he did to what I think is an easier way to teach it to athletes, where we focus on, so in, let's see here, in both of these books on the edges, I talk about these gears. In Language of Breath, I think I talk about the 3-gear system. I do break it down to eventually it gets to a 5-gear system, but a 3-gear system is so much easier to learn early on. And if you are up for training with me, if you're up for coaching, then that is when I will teach this to you. But Josh, to answer your question, nasal is not always better. There are appropriate times to do mouth breathing. One of the questions I got from one of my coaches that I was training was, what about my clients who are they're swimmers? How are they going to do nasal breathing all the time whenever they're swimmers? Well, you're just not. You're just not. And this is why training functional breathing is so important. And there are exercises that we do, and you can find them in, especially this book, A Practical Guide to Breath Work. I go over every single athletic training. I think I go over every single athletic training one. Or if you want to see me do it and learn with me, you can go to languageofbreathcollective.com and take the premium course, The Language of Breath. I literally show you how to do all these different techniques. But basically, you want to make it so that it doesn't really matter if you're breathing through your mouth with regards to your breath mechanics. And then you're going to be able to have the breath mechanics will be solid. And then the nice thing is, when you do need to break into mouth breathing, you're doing it functionally. You're not doing all this shoulder breathing and neck breathing and all this stuff. You're actually breathing functionally, but now you have a bigger exhaust hole. I mean, the size of the hole changes, and it's important to change that so that you get a faster exchange of air. So there are times whenever you do need to do that. Most people should be focusing on nasal breathing because most people get out of nasal breathing way too fast. And as a result, they haven't trained their breath mechanics. They have, and also the early times, like in zone 2 cardio, even zone 3 cardio, you can get a person, and I will say, I even train a lot of athletes to sprint nasal breathing, but over time, you're going to notice a metabolic load that will increase with the duration of the metabolic stressor. So you're going to start to notice sort of a buildup. Even if you're going at exactly the same pace, there's sort of a buildup, and eventually you're going to have to switch, or you don't have to, but eventually it's more beneficial to switch to different gears in the system so that you have a better gas exchange, so you can control that pH better, because that's ultimately what you're trying to do. Well, that's not all you're trying to do, but you're trying to do a lot of things. But yeah, so don't tape your mouth shut. If you're a competitive athlete, I better not see you taping your mouth shut. Okay. I expect read my books, take the online course, or if you really want to get it right and you make sure, you get my seal of approval, you can hire me for my time and we can make sure you get it right. This is something that it changes the game because it makes it so that you are able to breathe exactly to the metabolic load that you have on your system. And these are things I teach all my coaches in my Language of Breath school. So if that's something, if you're a coach or if you want to be a coach, and those are things you're interested in learning, well, that's what we're doing. So, okay. So I'm going to quickly go through here, and then I've got to get over to the breath club for our session. And Damien, you've been making a lot of comments here. Eric is here, or at least he was. Eric, I remember you mentioned, I think you reached out to me not too long ago, and you've you you had a cold or something. So I hope you're feeling better. Okay, so let's see. Do we have a limited amount of breathing in our lives? Okay, so there's a lot of people that have this belief. Do we have a limited number of breaths before we die? Yes, you do, but everyone's different, and it's less. It's more of a thing where it's like, do I have only so many days in my life or minutes in my life? Well, yeah, but you won't know until you die, and then it's not like it's not like breathing faster or whatever made it go any faster. So, I mean, uh, there's arguments to be made for each. I mean, there's an argument to be made that the slower breathing will probably make you live longer and you take fewer breaths that way. I mean, I could make a lot of different arguments there. Breathe hard equals acidic. No, breathing hard is going to equal, you're going to be more basic. So you're more alkaline. And alkalinity is one of the most misunderstood elements of the human organism, which I don't have time to get into why alkalinity is the biggest misunderstood one of the, maybe that'll be another thing I'll do in the near future, why alkalinity is not like the be all end all of all things. A lot of people think I used to think that. I was told by one of my early gurus, oh, when you go alkaline, oh, you kill all the bacteria and you do all these things. Some parts of you should be acidic. Some parts of you, need to be very acidic. So anyway, I'll get into that some other time. Let's see. Yeah, we have natural biases. Let's see. Yes, we talked about the beaches. What's the best breathing technique? It's 100% dependent on what's going on at the time, what signals the unconscious is sending you. So if you Okie the Goat 23, I love that. I love your name, Okie the Goat, and I hope you're here still, Okie the Goat. If you want to learn more about, so the language of breath it's all about learning how to interface with this conscious unconscious thing that you are. You are a relationship. And so that's a great question, but let me ask you this question. And this is sort of a similar question. What is the best word, right? What is the best sentence, right? So when we think about the language of breath and how it interfaces with our unconscious, we want to think about, okay, when we're breathing a certain way, what message are we sending? And is it appropriate for the situation? Is it an appropriate message for the conscious and unconscious combination that is you? For more on that, read this book, this book, or take my online course, which will take you very, very deep into it. So thank you for that question. It goes much deeper. Let's see here. So, okay, Damien, thank you for all of, let's see, filters. Yeah, we're going to use our filters. That's true. I read the first part of the language breath intro into the techniques and can't wait. Yes, you're going to love the book if you haven't already read it, and definitely take the online course if you get a chance, because there's a lot of guided sessions in there. I get to show you physically things. I explain how the lungs work. There's a whole diagram and things like that. So it's a lot of fun. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here. This has been a lot of fun, great discussion, and I appreciate you a ton. I'm going to switch over to the Breath Tribe. We're going to have our monthly breath party. If you haven't joined the Breath Club, you can take a look at the description box underneath, and there's a link there for just $5. You can join. $5 just to join a awesome breathwork session is a pretty good deal. But what this also gives you is access for the whole month to the entire breath catalog. So all the things that I do, including all the past sessions that we've done live. And there's over 100 guided sessions that are like beautiful music, professionally recorded and integrated into different, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, half hour. What are you looking for? So that's all available, and it's only $5 a month. Like I said, I don't know how much longer I can afford to only offer it for $5 a month, but hey, that's where we are right now. And today is a great day if you want to hop in. Guys, thank you so much. I will see you next time. Thanks for being here. And if you're in the Breath Club, I will see you in looks like 5 minutes.